Okay.
Think I'm playing, huh? Hit you with this big 4-5 hollow tips, gonna eat your up.
Shot dead after her birthday for breaking up with boyfriend. One day was supposed to be the start of her life. Instead, it became her last. November 2019. Warren, Michigan. 20-year-old India Mackey had just celebrated her birthday. A day filled with cake, presents, and dreams for the future. But within hours, those dreams would be shattered forever. Before we dive into this story, please like and subscribe to support and grow our community. India was creative, loving, and determined. Friends described her as the type of person who lit up a room. An aspiring photographer with a keen eye for beauty, she captured moments that others missed. Her smile was genuine, her laugh infectious. But beneath the smiles and laughter, India was caught in a relationship that those who loved her watched with growing concern. Especially her father, Joseph Polk, who sensed something wasn't right. A father's intuition told him his daughter was hiding pain, but he couldn't reach her in time. India's boyfriend was Kevin Dixon, just 18 years old. Their relationship had moved quickly, too quickly according to those who knew them best. But no one imagined how dangerously it would end. No one could have predicted that on the day after her birthday, India would record her own final moments on her cell phone. A video that would later become key evidence in a murder investigation. What pushed a young man to kill the woman who loved him? What warning signs were missed along the way? And could anyone have stopped this tragedy before it unfolded? India's story is more than just another headline. It's a warning, a heartbreak, and a call to action all at once. What makes someone stay in a relationship they know is dangerous? The answer might be more complicated than you think. India Mackey had dreams bigger than the small apartment she shared with her family in Detroit. She was the kind of young woman who collected moments, not things. Her camera was always ready to capture life as it happened around her. Born in 1999, India grew up watching the world change rapidly. Technology evolved, social media emerged, but certain dangers remained timeless. As a daughter, a sister, and a friend, India carried herself with quiet confidence. She didn't need to be the loudest person in the room to be remembered. Those who knew her best described a young woman with an old soul. She understood struggle because she had witnessed it firsthand in her community. This gave her a compassion beyond her years. India would often lend an ear or offer help without being asked. Her father, Joseph Polk, had worked hard to instill those values in her. At 20, India was still figuring out her path. She had plans to pursue photography professionally someday. Her Instagram page was filled with candid shots of friends, beautiful landscapes, and quiet moments that told stories without words. She had an eye for beauty in ordinary places. But like many young women her age, India struggled with the complications of love. She believed in second chances, sometimes to a fault. She wanted to see the good in people, even when others noticed red flags. India's relationship history had been a series of lessons. Some painful, others transformative. But nothing prepared her for Kevin Dixon. They met through mutual friends at a time when India was feeling particularly vulnerable. A recent breakup had left her questioning her worth, and Kevin's attention felt like validation. Joseph Polk noticed the change in his daughter almost immediately after she began dating Kevin. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed. Phone calls became shorter. Family gatherings were often missed. The photography she loved so much took a backseat to a relationship that seemed to demand all of her energy. The signs of trouble were there, though subtle at first. India began to dress differently, choosing clothes that covered more of her body even in warm weather. Her once frequent posts on social media became rare. When she did post, her smile never quite reached her eyes. Friends started to notice bruises that India would explain away with stories of accidents and clumsiness. Excuses that those who cared about her wanted desperately to believe. What keeps a bright, beloved young woman in a relationship that slowly drains the life from her. Is it love? Fear? Hope that things will change? For India, it might have been all three. As her 20th birthday approached in November 2019, India seemed to be pulling away from Kevin. She confided in a close friend that she was thinking about ending the relationship. She just needed to find the right time. It was complicated. But time was the one thing India Mackey didn't have. And the complications of her relationship were about to turn deadly in ways no one could have predicted. What happens when leaving becomes more dangerous than staying? And how does a birthday celebration turn into a murder scene within hours? Kevin Dixon presented himself as charming, attentive, and mature beyond his 18 years when he first entered India's life. Friends would later recall how he seemed so put together, so sure of himself. He had a way with words that made him seem thoughtful and deep. But beneath the surface charm lay a troubling history that few in India's circle knew about. Kevin had grown up surrounded by conflict and had witnessed domestic violence from an early age. These childhood experiences shaped his understanding of relationships in profoundly damaging ways. The red flags appeared early but were disguised as concern and affection. Kevin's persistent texting when India was out with friends wasn't just eagerness to talk, it was monitoring. His surprise visits weren't romantic gestures, they were checks to verify her whereabouts. His complaints about her male friends weren't jealousy, they were isolation tactics. Kevin's need for control escalated gradually. At first, his opinions about India's clothing seemed like compliments. "That outfit looks amazing on you," slowly transformed to, "I don't think you should wear that out." What began as suggestions became demands. The pattern was textbook, but to India, it was her first experience with this type of manipulation. Kevin would create tension, cause pain, and then shower her with affection, a cycle designed to create emotional dependency. After each fight, the makeup period would feel so loving that India believed things were improving. Their arguments grew more intense over time. Neighbors in their apartment building reported hearing shouting matches that would suddenly go quiet. What they couldn't hear were the threats Kevin would whisper when no one else could hear, threats that made India feel trapped. Kevin's possessiveness over India's phone and social media accounts increased. He would scroll through her messages while she watched, questioning her about innocent conversations. He began to dictate who she could talk to, where she could go, and how long she could be gone. Those who met Kevin briefly often described him as polite and well-mannered. This public face made it harder for others to believe India when she occasionally hinted at problems. The disconnect between his public and private behavior is a common tactic of abusers, creating doubt about the victim's experiences. By the fall of 2019, Kevin's behavior had grown increasingly erratic. His mood swings were unpredictable, and his anger more volatile. What worried India's father most was Kevin's fascination with guns. Joseph Polk had caught glimpses of social media posts where Kevin posed with firearms, an image at odds with the respectful young man Kevin pretended to be around India's family. Kevin began to sense that India was pulling away. In the weeks leading up to her birthday, their relationship had become more strained. India had confided in a friend about her plans to end things. Perhaps Kevin sensed this shift. Perhaps he saw that his control was slipping. For abusers, the most dangerous time in a relationship is when the victim attempts to leave. Statistics show that domestic violence often escalates to lethal levels during separation or attempted separation. This critical fact would prove devastatingly relevant in India's case. On November 19, 2019, India celebrated her 20th birthday. Photos from that day show her smiling, surrounded by loved ones, but Kevin is noticeably absent from these images. Was this separation deliberate? Had something already happened between them? What transpired in the hours after those birthday celebrations would reveal the true nature of Kevin Dixon, not as the charming young man India had first met, but as someone capable of unfathomable violence. The progression from control to violence in India's relationship with Kevin followed a haunting pattern that experts recognize all too well. What began as emotional manipulation gradually transformed into something far more dangerous. The first physical incident happened about 3 months into their relationship. During an argument, Kevin grabbed India's wrist with such force that it left marks. He apologized profusely afterward, promising it would never happen again. India wanted to believe him. But the promise was broken within weeks. A shove during an argument. A phone slapped from her hand when she tried to call a friend. Each incident slightly more severe than the last, each followed by tearful apologies and temporary periods of calm. India began making excuses to her family about why she couldn't attend gatherings. The truth was that she feared questions about the marks on her arms, the occasional bruise she couldn't quite hide with makeup. She became isolated from her support network precisely when she needed them most. Joseph Polk noticed the changes in his daughter. The light in her eyes dimmed. Her passion for photography waned as Kevin criticized her artistic interests as a waste of time. Her once vibrant social media presence became sparse and carefully curated to show only what Kevin approved. By summer 2019, India had developed strategies to minimize conflict. She learned which topics triggered Kevin's anger. She adapted her behavior to avoid his outbursts. This hypervigilance, a constant state of alertness to potential danger, is common among abuse victims. It's exhausting, draining the spirit day by day. There were moments when India tried to break free. In August 2019, after a particularly frightening episode where Kevin punched a wall inches from her head, she told him it was over. She stayed with a friend for 3 days. But Kevin's persistent messages wore her down, alternating between threats, apologies, and promises to change. She returned, hoping things would be different. They weren't. By fall, Kevin's possessiveness had reached alarming levels. He demanded access to her phone at random times. He began showing up unexpectedly at her workplace. When she spent time with family, he would text continuously, demanding to know who she was talking to and when she would leave. The most troubling escalation involved Kevin's gun. He began bringing it out during arguments, not pointing it at India but making sure she saw it, a silent threat that spoke volumes. This tactic of intimidation left India paralyzed with fear. In late October, just weeks before her birthday, India confided in a close friend that she was afraid. She described how Kevin had begun threatening to harm himself if she ever left him, a manipulation tactic designed to hold her hostage emotionally. India's father sensed the danger. He tried repeatedly to intervene, inviting India to move back home, offering to help her start fresh somewhere else. But Kevin had convinced India that no one would understand their relationship, that outsiders were trying to come between them. The tragic reality of domestic violence is that victims often stay because leaving feels more dangerous than remaining. Kevin had made it clear what would happen if India tried to leave him for good. His threats were specific and terrifying. On November 18, 2019, India celebrated her 20th birthday surrounded by family and friends. Photos from that day show glimpses of the bright, hopeful young woman she once was. For a brief moment, she seemed to recapture some of her former spirit. What no one knew was that India had made a decision. According to text messages recovered later, she had told Kevin that morning that their relationship was over. She was reclaiming her life. But Kevin had other plans. The next day, November 19th, would become the deadliest day of their troubled relationship. November 19, 2019. The day after India Mackey's 20th birthday would become her last. The morning began with tension. India and Kevin were in his car, a white van parked outside his home in Warren, Michigan. What should have been an ordinary moment turned extraordinary when India made a crucial decision. She took out her phone and began recording. The video she captured would later become critical evidence. In it, Kevin can be seen loading bullets into a handgun. His demeanor is calm, methodical, as if loading a weapon in front of the woman he supposedly loved was an everyday occurrence. India's voice, though shaky, documents the moment with surprising clarity. Why did she start recording? Perhaps she sensed danger. Perhaps she wanted evidence of his threatening behavior. Or perhaps, most heart-wrenching of all, she somehow knew what was coming and wanted to leave behind proof of what happened to her.
Okay.
Within moments of India stopping the recording, Kevin pulled the trigger. A single gunshot to the head ended all of India's dreams, all of her potential, all of the life she had lived and would have lived. Just hours after celebrating the milestone of turning 20, her life was extinguished. But the tragedy did not end there. In a display of shocking callousness, Kevin did not call for help. Instead, he drove around with India's body in the passenger seat of his van. The young woman who had brought so much light to others sat lifeless while her killer contemplated his next move. Kevin's reckless driving caught the attention of police in East Point, a neighboring city. When officers pulled over the white van for a traffic violation, they had no idea what horror they would discover inside. The officer approached the driver's side window expecting a routine traffic stop. Instead, he found a visibly distraught Kevin and, beside him, India's body. The police dashcam captured the moment of Kevin's arrest. His concerns were not for India but for himself. While officers attempted life-saving measures on India, Kevin asked about potential charges and his future. His priorities revealed much about the relationship dynamic that had ended so violently. Emergency medical services rushed to the scene, but it was too late. India Mackey was pronounced dead at the scene, her promising life cut short by the person who should have cherished her most. News of India's murder spread quickly through the community. Joseph Polk received the call every parent dreads. His worst fears about his daughter's relationship had materialized in the most devastating way possible. The father who had tried to protect his daughter was now left to plan her funeral. The investigation revealed disturbing details. The gun Kevin used was unregistered. Text messages recovered from both phones showed an escalating pattern of threats in the days leading up to the murder. Friends came forward with stories of concerning behavior they had witnessed but hadn't reported. Most damning of all was India's final video. Those last moments she recorded revealed not just a man with a gun, but the casual nature with which Kevin wielded his power over her. The footage showed what domestic violence experts have long maintained, that the most dangerous time for a victim is when they are trying to leave. Kevin Dixon was charged with first-degree murder, carrying a concealed weapon, and felony firearm possession. The evidence against him was overwhelming. India's final act of documentation would ensure that her story would not be distorted or forgotten. As the community reeled from the shocking crime, many asked the same question: how could this happen? The signs had been there, the isolation, the control, the previous violence. Yet somehow, a young woman full of promise ended up dead just hours after celebrating her birthday. India's story is tragically common. Every day in America, an average of 3 women are killed by current or former intimate partners. Behind each statistic is a person like India, someone with dreams, talents, people who loved them, and a future stolen away. The aftermath of India Mackey's murder sent shockwaves through multiple communities. Her family, her friends, and even strangers who learned of her story were left to grapple with the senseless violence that had claimed such a bright young life. For Joseph Polk, the grief was compounded by haunting questions. Could he have done more? Should he have been more forceful in his interventions? The burden of these thoughts weighed heavily as he made funeral arrangements for a daughter he should never have had to bury. India's funeral saw hundreds gather to remember her. Photos of her smiling face surrounded the casket, along with her camera, the tool of her passion. Friends shared stories of her kindness, her creativity, her infectious laugh. But underneath the remembrances lay a current of anger that such a life had been cut short by domestic violence. Macomb County Prosecutor Eric Smith took a personal interest in the case. At a press conference announcing the charges against Kevin Dixon, Smith made a point of highlighting the video India had recorded in her final moments. This video is being taken by a young woman who clearly knew something bad was about to happen to her, Smith told reporters. The evidence she left behind would prove crucial. Kevin Dixon was charged with first-degree murder, carrying a concealed weapon, and felony firearm. If convicted, he faced life in prison without possibility of parole. In an unexpected twist, prosecutors also charged Kevin's mother, Nikita Dixon, with accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence. Phone records revealed she had advised her son on how to hide evidence after the shooting. The case moved slowly through the court system, delayed further by the COVID-19 pandemic that began just months after India's murder. For her family, each postponement, each legal maneuver was another obstacle to closure. During this time, India's story gained attention beyond local news. Advocates against domestic violence shared her story as a tragic example of why warning signs must be taken seriously. India became more than a victim, she became a symbol of a pervasive problem that claims too many lives. In February 2021, Kevin Dixon accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder. The deal spared India's family the trauma of a trial but raised questions about justice. Many felt that nothing short of a first-degree murder conviction would truly acknowledge the deliberate nature of the crime. At the sentencing hearing in March 2021, Joseph Polk finally had his chance to address his daughter's killer. His victim impact statement spoke not only of his overwhelming grief but of the potential lost, the photographs India would never take, the family she would never start, the life she would never live. Judge Diane Druzinski sentenced Kevin Dixon to 40 to 60 years in prison. While the sentence ensured he would spend decades behind bars, for many, no punishment seemed adequate for the life he had taken. Nikita Dixon also faced consequences for her role, receiving a sentence of 1 year in jail and 3 years of probation. Her complicity highlighted how domestic violence sometimes involves not just the direct perpetrator but those who enable them. In the years since India's murder, her story has become part of a larger conversation about intimate partner violence. Local domestic violence organizations have used her case to educate young people about relationship red flags. Her father has become an advocate, speaking at events about the importance of intervention before violence escalates. India's photography, preserved by her family, has been displayed at awareness events, allowing her artistic voice to continue even after her death. Through these images, attendees glimpse the world as India saw it, full of beauty and possibility. The tragedy of India Mackey's story lies not just in how it ended, but in how preventable it was. The warning signs were textbook. The escalation followed patterns familiar to experts. Yet somehow, a young woman with dreams and talents still lost her life to domestic violence. What remains is a call to action. How many more Indias must be lost before we take domestic violence seriously? How many more families must plan funerals for vibrant young lives cut short? India's story reminds us that domestic violence is not a private matter but a community responsibility. It asks us all a simple question: next time we see the warning signs, will we act before it's too late? Her life mattered. Her death matters. And the lessons from both can save lives if we have the courage to heed them.